Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you my review of the 25th mystery in the Nancy Drew series, Nancy Drew Alibi in Ashes. Now, as usual, all of my reviews are based on 5 separate categories. Those categories are plot, characters, setting and design, entertainment and gameplay value, and music and vibe. Each of those categories is scored on a scale of 1 to 10 for a total possible score out of 50, and then I assign a letter grade to each game as well. Quick warning, this review will contain some mild plot spoilers. It won't give you any major spoilers about events that happen in the game, but spoilers more along the lines of things you might see in the promotional materials, such as characters that you might see or locations that you might visit. So, without further ado, let's get into our review for Alibi in Ashes, starting off with the plot. Now, this mystery is really unique in the Nancy Drew series. The plot is very different than anything that we've seen before. First of all, because it takes place in Nancy's hometown of River Heights. Nancy isn't traveling anywhere for this case. She is at home. And second of all, because Nancy is kind of the person who needs to solve the case for herself. She's not solving it for somebody else. She is trying to prove her own innocence because Nancy is accused of arson. So the old town hall burns down in River Heights, which is this historic building that is apparently very important to the town, and Nancy gets blamed for it. She gets arrested for it, and she needs to prove that she was not the one who burned down the town hall. I really enjoy this plot, and I think it's really neat for the series to have had the 25th mystery be something so unique and something that is part of the canon in this way. It's kind of a nice culmination of everything that we've seen in the series leading up to this point, and just a celebration of Nancy Drew as a character, and a celebration of River Heights. So, we get to go around River Heights and explore it a little bit, see some kind of iconic places that are in the books. We get to see lots of cookies from previous games scattered throughout the game, especially in Nancy's house, which we also get to visit. It's just a really brilliant idea and a really great way to celebrate Nancy at this point in the series. I think the plot is very original, and I think it's really interesting. It definitely focuses around more police detective work rather than kind of the private detective work that Nancy has been doing up to this point. So a lot of the things that she is doing are things that police detectives would do, which is kind of fun. It's really neat getting to practice some of those criminology type ways of solving a mystery. For example, using a gas chromatograph, or getting fingerprints, or getting alibis, reading up on arson. All of those things that police detectives would do, Nancy gets to do, and her friends get to do it with her, which I think is really, really neat. The only problem that I have with the plot is that it was incredibly easy for me to guess the culprit. I don't know if that is the case for everyone that has played this game, but for me at least, this was one game where I wasn't even trying too hard to figure out who the culprit would be, and I was able to figure it out within the first 10 minutes of the game who it ended up being, and I was right by the end of the mystery. So the fact that that hasn't happened to me before in other mysteries, even when I'm trying to figure out who the culprit is, it's usually a little bit more difficult. That tells me that there was probably something a little bit wrong with the writing, that it was just way too obvious who that culprit would end up being. That might not be the case for everyone, but it was the case for me, so I can't give the plot a perfect score even though I really enjoy it, but I do give the plot a very solid 9 out of 10. Now we move on to characters. Again, the characters in this game are totally unique and original compared to the rest of the games in the series because we are in River Heights and because we actually get to play as Nancy's best friends and her boyfriend, Ned. So Bess and George and Ned are physical characters. We see Bess and George. We do not physically see Ned, but we can play as all 3 of them. We have a lot of fun phone friends. We can call Nancy's dad, Carson Drew, for the first time in a very long time. We have not gotten to talk to Carson in forever. Hannah sends Nancy a little gift package, so Hannah is kind of there in spirit, which is really neat. And then for our physical characters, we have some really neat characters that are part of River Heights itself. So we have Tony Scolari, who is the owner of Scoop, which is an ice cream store in town and kind of a member of city council, so an important governmental figure. We have Alexei Markovic, who is the owner of a antique store in town, and he actually used to be a detective, so he has a fair amount in common with Nancy. We have Brenda Carlton, who is a local reporter and has been reporting on the fire. And we have Deirdre Shannon, who is another student, I guess I would say, that is Nancy's age and is kind of like Nancy's frenemy or arch rival in a way. She says she hates Nancy, but she doesn't hate Nancy. They have kind of just this fun relationship, which is neat to explore. So we have those 4 characters, and when Nancy is out of jail, she is able to see Bess and George, which I think is really neat. And I do enjoy the concept of Bess, George, and Ned being able to actually physically help solve a mystery for a large portion of the mystery. We have seen it before where they get to help out for little bits and pieces of it. Like in Legend of the Crystal Skull, Bess gets to help out a little bit, but this is more of a duration. This is for a majority of the mystery, which I think is really neat. And I really love all of the characters in River Heights itself. The conversations with them are really fun. They're a little bit brief, but I think they kind of work. Just the writing style is that way, but it works out well, because we still get a lot of really juicy information from those brief conversations. They feel very natural, they feel very real. When people get offended, it makes sense that they would get offended. There's a lot of drama and a lot of gossip going around, which is really fun. A lot of the information that we get in this mystery comes from your character interaction, which I think shows how important the characters are to the overall mystery itself. It makes it really fun interacting with them. Alexei Markovic is honestly probably one of my top 5 favorite characters in the entire series, just because of his personality and his backstory. All of the characters have nice little backstories and little things that make them feel a lot more three-dimensional, much more deep. My one issue with the characters, I do have one problem, is that once Nancy gets out of jail, Bess, George, and Ned essentially drop off the face of the earth, especially Ned. We don't see Ned, and when you call Ned to try and talk to him, he just says hello, and then Nancy says goodbye. So, which is totally weird and totally unnatural. Ned wouldn't do that. He is an extremely loyal boyfriend, and when Nancy got out of jail after he's been working this whole time to get her out, he wouldn't just not say anything and just ghost everyone and disappear. Bess kind of does something similar where Nancy is out of jail, and when she sees Bess for the first time, Bess is just like, oh, hey, Nancy, it's no big deal. So I think that was really weird that Bess, George, and Ned got to be so important to solving the mystery at first, but once Nancy's out, they essentially have very little role. The only one who gets to do anything else after that is George, and the other 2 we hardly see or literally do not see at all. I do have a bit of a problem with that. I think the characters should have been included more fully, especially in the last third or so of the mystery. So I give characters a solid 9 out of 10. Next, we move on to setting and design, which takes into consideration where the game takes place and how the overall design of the game supports the overall mystery. The setting and design of this game is so cool. Like I mentioned, this game takes place in River Heights, which is largely believed to be in Illinois. So it's in River Heights for the very first time. We get to see where Nancy lives. We get to see the town where she grew up. Everybody knows who she is. She's kind of like the town hero, almost like a legendary figure in the town because she is so famous for solving all of these cases. She is so good at it. So seeing all of these people that know Nancy on a more personal, small town level. I grew up in a small town, and when you do live in a small town, everybody knows who everyone is. You might not be friends with everyone, but you still have the dirt on everyone. You know who people are and what they do and what their lives are like. So seeing that for Nancy was really neat, and I think River Heights was beautifully designed. It's a stunning town. It has such a fun, light atmosphere to it. All of the places that we visit are beautiful and so fun to explore. We get to go to Nancy's house. We get to go to the local ice cream shop. We get to see the old town hall, which is like a historic fixture in the town. Everywhere that we get to visit is really cool. We also see a map view of River Heights, so you can see lots of other buildings that have been referenced in the books and are a part of River Heights, the actual town. And they do at one point mention Josiah Crowley's will being found, which kind of brings us back to Secret of the Oak Clock, which is another mystery that sort of took place in the River Heights area. I think all of that was done really, really well. My one problem with the setting and design is that everything is spread a little bit thin. And the locations that we do get to go to and actually look at, the exploration is pretty minimal at all of those locations. There's really only a few things you can look at and a few things that you can find in each of the locations, with the exception sort of being Nancy's house because you can find so many cool cookies there. But all the other places, there's only a handful of things you can look at. It's definitely not an exploration-based game, and a lot of the clues are coming more from the gossip that you're getting from characters more than the exploration. I think they lost a little bit of potential to really make the setting feel a little bit deeper in that sense and a little bit more important to the mystery as a whole. But for the most part, I think the setting and design was extremely successful. So I give setting and design a 9 out of 10. Now moving on to entertainment and gameplay value, which considers how fun the game is to play and how fun it is to replay. I think this game is super fun. I really enjoy playing this one. It is definitely a lighter mystery. It's very sunny, it's very enjoyable, it's very light. Even though the subject matter is fairly heavy, I mean, Nancy being framed for arson is kind of a big deal. The rest of it and everything that we do, it doesn't feel extremely intense. So I think this is a really good mystery for detectives who appreciate something a little bit lighter and a little bit less intense, maybe something less scary. This is definitely a good mystery for those kinds of detectives. And I think for any detective, it's just kind of refreshing because while we might enjoy those scary mysteries, it's nice to take a break from that every once in a while and have just a lighter mystery. I think it really succeeds in doing the mystery justice so that it is fun to play even if it doesn't feel like the most consequential mystery that we've ever solved. So it's definitely fun to play. There are not a ton of puzzles. It's very light on puzzles. And the puzzles that are in the game definitely feel like puzzles that should be in the game. It feels like something that Nancy and her friends need to do, like picking a lock or getting a fingerprint or opening up a puzzle box. Things like that make a lot more sense for puzzles because it feels like something that needs to be done in order for the mystery to be solved rather than a chore per se. There's a side game that you can play, a side puzzle. I think everything comes together really nicely to make this game extremely fun to play. My one problem with this, I kind of have one problem per category this review. My one problem with the entertainment and gameplay value ends up being that we bounce around a lot between people and places without getting a whole ton of depth. So while it is neat that we can play as Bess, George, and Ned, we spend a lot of time using phone calls to bounce between those characters, and sometimes you need to be a certain person to get a certain job done. So if you haven't played the mystery before, it can get kind of confusing and a little bit muddled. Same thing with bouncing around between the places. We go to a lot of different places throughout the mystery, and we do it frequently, so it feels like we spend a lot of time driving from place to place or watching the little car move from place to place on the map. When you're replaying the game, I don't feel like that is as much of an issue because you kind of know who needs to go where and when. You kind of work out the logic of the system. But the first time you're playing it, it does get a little bit muddled and it does get a little bit confusing, which I think can take away from the entertainment value just a smidge. So for entertainment and gameplay value, I give Alibi and Ashes a solid 9 out of 10. Finally, we move on to music and vibe, which considers how the music is in the game and how the overall vibe of the game is conveyed. I think this is an extremely successful area for this game. The soundtrack for this game is very light, very bouncy, very sunshiny, just kind of like the day that we're having in River Heights. It's very fun. It does a really great job of conveying that atmosphere of fun. I would say the soundtrack for this game probably makes it up to one of my top 5 favorite soundtracks. It's just really pleasant to listen to. And there are moments where the soundtrack gets a little bit more serious, and that's when you know, ooh, things are really starting to get bad. That's kind of nice because it kind of gives you a hint of when things are getting more serious, which they don't for a majority of the case. So I think the music does a very nice job of supporting the overall plot. The vibe of the game, as I mentioned before, is very light, very refreshing, very fun, very pleasant. River Heights is just a pleasant place to be, and I think they did a great job conveying that with the sunny day, the really pleasant music, all of the very cozy little locations that we can visit. It has just kind of a comforting small town feel to it, and I think that they conveyed that very successfully. So I give music and vibe a perfect 10 out of 10. Now, if we add up our score for this game, we have 9 for plot, 9 for characters, 9 for setting and design, 9 for entertainment and gameplay value, and 10 for music and vibe, which gives us a total possible score of 46 out of 50 and a final possible grade of an A-. So, should you play this game? I would say absolutely. For anyone who is a fan of the Nancy Drew series, I think this is an excellent way to celebrate who Nancy Drew is as a detective and to honor all of the games that have come before this, because there are references to every single game. I think it is an important part of this series because of that celebration, and also just because of the arc that it has for Nancy's character. I think it's really interesting to see her be on the other side of a mystery, where she has more of a personal connection to wanting it solved. I think they do that very effectively. I think the plot is written very well. I think the characters are really fun and memorable. The setting is so enjoyable. You have such a fun time when you're in River Heights. It's just overall a very successful game. There are a couple things here and there that maybe could have been done a bit differently, but I think everything comes together very nice for a very cohesive, very fun, and definitely a game that I would recommend any detective play. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments section down below. Please feel free to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you are interested in any more Nancy Drew content. Thank you so much for listening to this review, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.